Okay, race, gender, and crime. Let's try this again. So, hold on, I'm hitting and juggling the table. Yesterday, I had started recording part of the Module 2 discussion for you when I got a knock at the door. I'm going to go off topic here for a little bit, but it is relevant to you guys. Um, the person who knocked at the door, I had an issue with the cable service on the TV. So somebody showed up, a technician showed up, and didn't recognize the person right away. Person was in the house for about 15 seconds and asked, "Do you teach at IRSC criminal justice?" And I said, "Yeah," and questioned who I was. And then he told me who he was. And he has graduated more than 4 years ago. And I can tell you it made my day, which was why I didn't get back in and finish this video, because I ended up spending a ton of time with him. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is the fact that I want you to know, one, the type of person and teacher that I am, and two, to show you where you can go. So this individual wasn't really a school person, and let's just say had a tough life growing up, and finally came to school and had a bunch of encouragement to do that, and successfully completed the criminal justice program and got his BS back in 2018. And I had said, which I always say, there are some jobs, if you're interested in them, that we can get you right in right away. But pretty much things are, at some point in time, you're going to end up going back to school and getting a master's degree. Some of you will get your PhD. It just depends on where you want to go. And I can tell you, those of you that are rolling your eyes at me right now, just like he did, uh, I expect an email, a Facebook message, an Instagram, a something of you with your master's cap and gown on that says, "Dang, Dr. M, you were right. It's been 5 years, but I went back." And once you're hooked, you're hooked. Okay. And the sky's the limit. The reason I'm bringing him up is, one, he made my day with all the compliments and things that he had to say. And two, I am so proud of you guys when you do things and you think outside the box. So here he is, he shows up at my house as a technician to work on my TV. And I said, "Okay, so what made you not go into the CJ field?" And he ended up saying, "Well, I did." And I said, "Okay, explain." Um, he chose to work for one of the local, wow, I got to work on the sorry. He chose to work for one of the local uh, cable companies. Reason he chose that was because he knew it would be a long-term career and there was a lot of overtime, so he would make good money. And he also read the position that he applied for, they would pay for grad school. So, brilliant move on his part. He got his master's in criminal justice, focusing on cybersecurity, free. Okay, it got completely paid for. So now he has been for several years working as a technician for this company, and his intent is to transfer into their cybersecurity division. I didn't even think twice about, an internet company such as, whether you have AT&T, Uverse, or Xfinity, Comcast, whatever. And I am way outside the box, didn't think about that he is going to transfer into something that if he had gone straight into a bachelor's job with just that degree, he said he couldn't make as much money as what they hired him at. So he thought the long game. And sometimes I want you guys to do that. Look at the long game. This may not be what you want to do right now, but it's a stepping stone. So he is actually, I believe he told me he will be applying to that division, and his recommendations, his comments, everything that's come back in his file has been amazing and excellent. I absolutely told him that I will write a recommendation letter for him because I do remember him both face to face and then he finished online. But he will be in the CJ system and doing something he's very good at and something he likes. So he will be working cybersecurity, keeping us safe, whether we're playing video games online or people try and break in through our internet and the modems and take over everything. That's what he likes. And he's already got a head start because he started at the bottom and he knows how the physical structure works and he can move forward. So, yay, I am absolutely proud of Paul and want you to start thinking about that too. If you have questions or comments or whatever, throw them at me and we'll chat and see what weird directions you can go to make yourself happy. Okay, so let's get back to this last piece of the class, this module 2 that I want to talk about. And it is basically the issues that we're having regardless of race. It could be gender, meaning men, boys, maybe becoming, well, they always have been, but they are getting more attention, negative attention from law enforcement than females do. Lo and behold, let me tell you this, any law enforcement officer will tell you they are willing to jump into a fight between two guys to break it up. They do not want to jump into a fight, and rarely do they jump into a fight between two females. We don't fight fair, and we're just nasty. So, I mean, when you see the earrings coming off and the high heels coming off, get out of the way. So, it doesn't have to be a black, white, and Asian thing. It can be a male female thing. It can be an age thing. I am going to draw less attention than some of you that are younger. And I don't, because we're online, I don't know how old you guys are. So, but if you're 18, 19, 20, 23, 24, maybe, you're going to draw more attention because are you dual enrolled? So we technically don't have curfews here. But we do. We just call them something else. Uh, are you 18, 19, 20, and you're working in a restaurant or a bar type environment where there's alcohol? So they're going to pay attention to you because are you drinking underage? Are you 21 to 24 and you haven't learned your lesson that throwing up every weekend is not worth the fun you had for a short period of time while drinking? So, and I know some of you laughed because really, truly, once you turn 21, your drinking usually goes down a little bit because now all of a sudden you're having to pay for it, where when you were underage, somebody was giving it to you. And usually you don't have control, and we've all been there, okay? So many of you have prayed to the porcelain god and slept on the bathroom floor. I have a student who told me that she didn't know why she woke up in the shower one morning. So you're living life, you're being crazy. Like I said, everybody, we've all been there, we've all done that. But because of your age, which I want to include in the class, race, gender, and crime, it's not just race and gender, it's age, it's a bunch of different things. It's religion. So certain people are going to draw more attention to themselves, right or wrong, simply because of who and what they are or what the perception of that group is. Okay. And unfortunately, stereotypes exist. They usually start with a grain of truth. What may be right about one area, maybe boys in this neighborhood are out vandalizing and this and that, but that doesn't mean that every boy in the city or the county is out doing that. Uh, Girls may be using fake IDs to get into bars, to drink underage, and end up getting involved with people that are a little bit older. That may be happening at a single bar or restaurant, but that doesn't mean that every girl that walks in there is underage, and it doesn't mean that every restaurant in that area allows that behavior to go by or does not have somebody trained well enough to catch the fake IDs. So I want you to think about those things and realize it's more than black and white, okay? And then think about the issues we have, both good and bad, around our country, or if you want to even, let's make it small. I told you yesterday, I don't want a microcosm. I don't want it city by city, but you can see it in city by city, and then I want you to broaden it out. Uh, we have an issue here on the Treasure Coast that different counties have different criminal problems. The drugs we use in one county are different than the drugs that are being used in a different county. So law enforcement isn't necessarily cohesively working on the same thing. We have human trafficking very prevalent here on the Treasure Coast, okay? And that will be a gender issue, but you need to be aware that boys are trafficked as well as girls, okay? And yes, they still will traffic adults, but they predominantly focus on younger people. So, how does law enforcement deal with that? And how are they trained for something that they didn't know was going to be? We're always behind the curve. A problem comes up, we have to learn how to address it, making a lot of mistakes along the way. Some are intentional mistakes, and most are not, okay? Do we hear stories of police misuse, abuse, and things like that? Absolutely. You can talk to myself or Mr. Dewey, and we're both pro law enforcement. However, we will acknowledge that there are problems within the entire system, and there are bad apples in that system. And there are many law enforcement officers of some of these cases that have hit nationally that I can't defend to you. And I've gone and sat down in Mr. Dewey's office and I said, look, I watched this video 15 times. I watched it on Fox, I watched it on CNN, I watched it on MSNBC. So I make sure I'm very well rounded in getting both sides of liberal, conservative, and supposedly neutral news and how they're playing the narrative. But there have been some that I can't defend the law enforcement officer. And I will even leave race out of it. Let's go, I think it was Eric Garner in New York City that one of the officers jumped on him and gave him a chokehold. Okay, Eric Garner is a big guy, and yes, he had some issues with law enforcement, that he had interacted with them and he'd been in trouble before. But that's not what's important to me. What's important to me is what happened that particular day that resulted in the death of Mr. Garner. Mr. Dewey nor I could defend the actions. When somebody says, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, 99.9% of the time, they can breathe, because you have to be able to breathe to talk, okay? So Mr. Garner was saying, I can't breathe. However, he had underlying conditions, and then the use of the chokehold, he probably couldn't breathe, okay? So forget that. Forget that it was a white officer. Forget that Mr. Garner was a black male. Forget that it's in New York and there's lots of issues going on. I couldn't defend. I'll just pick one thing. I think it was 1975 that the protocol handbook for NYPD, the chokehold was no longer a permissible use of force. It was taken out. Okay. I'm a martial artist, and I can tell you, if you don't do it right, you could severely damage or kill somebody. Okay. So it's not just a way to restrain or gain control. If you screw it up, there could be major consequences. Well, if it hadn't been in the protocol and been being taught since the 70s, how is this officer, I don't care, pink, purple, black, white, male, female, new, rookie, what, how could he know how to use that properly? Even as a martial artist, I don't like touching that. Okay. I have other things that I am very well trained in that I would much rather use than something that too many things can go wrong. So for that, I side with Mr. Garner on this one, because I can't even, that one fact alone, I can't defend law enforcement. So I want you to realize I am not biased and going to go pro, or white, or if somebody's getting a bad rap. No, sometimes you don't even have to argue that big picture. It's clear cut. You used a defense thing, a defense tool that was not permitted. That alone answers enough questions for me. You're not doing your job right. Okay? So when you look at that, let's just use the Garner case. Is this guy a bad cop? Is this guy too think he's all macho cool? Is he racist, and because he's a white individual, he's just picking on a black individual? Is has he not been trained? Did he not pay attention intentionally to knowing that that use of force, that chokehold, was something he was not permitted to use? The other officers that stood by, of different ethnic backgrounds, predominantly white, do they hold responsibility for his actions? So what if that guy had rookies around him that were brand new? Are you going to fight and jump on the chain of command and go, yo, dude, what you're doing's wrong, that's not allowed? Or, yo, he really can't breathe? Are you going to pull the officer off if he's higher rank than you? There's an intimidation factor. So who's right, who's wrong? We have lost trust in law enforcement because of a variety of issues. And those of you that are going to go on to be it really doesn't matter what part of the system you go into, you bear some responsibility in helping to make changes to get the system back to where it's not so skewed, where we do not like law enforcement just because they're law enforcement. We need to work on maybe you are going to look at, when I told you you can look at those cities, your other assignment is to talk about sorry, I'm hitting the table. You talk about community policing. We don't have that anymore. Okay. I think even when I was a kid, that was probably the very end. I mean, I was young when I remember it, so it stopped within my teenage years. But the law enforcement officer walking up and down the street, and everybody would say, "Hey, Officer Smith," or run up and give him a hug, or he's giving you, a piece of bubble gum. He's part of everyday life and a friend, somebody that you can confide in. Well, now, and I know this happened to me as a martial artist, so imagine law enforcement who actually has control over us, okay, legally. I would have parents where the kids would get in trouble at school, or not do their homework, or whatever, okay, or not clean their room, or lie to their parents, and they would say, wait till we get to the dojo tonight, and Sensei Masnick hears about your behavior. Well, you know what you just did? You took away my power to teach them and train them better manners, and you made me a scary individual that they don't want anything to do with. Okay? So now you've made me a bad guy. We have done the same thing with law enforcement. Some deserve that title, but they all don't. Okay? We do the same thing. We say, "Oh, lawyers are okay." Some of them are completely off their rocker and you wouldn't want anything to do with them. But they're not all bad. Okay? Not all judges are hammer judges. You know, some of them take situations into consideration. So, would it help to bring that community policing back? We are in that cycle that many of the agencies, especially around here, I know Fort Pierce is big on getting out and walking the streets and keeping people in the same zone so you get familiar with them. City of Stewart, they're just all over the place. Okay, some of them are former students, some of them are friends, and I make fun of them like they're riding their little segways up and down the streets downtown, chit chatting with people, whatever. So yeah, I make fun of them when I see them on the segways. But you know, people are on horseback or bicycles or whatever. Do we need more of that? And don't just ride your bike or your horse or your walk by people. You need to interact with them. You need to learn those kids' names that work at the pizza place and the, all the other places. So you need to make your presence known. Do you think, and some of these questions, I had one of you email me and say, I'm not really sure how to answer this question. Realize the difference between me and Professor Bradford is that I know the law, but that's not what I'm trained in, and that's not what I'm teaching you. I'm teaching you theory, concepts, the system as a whole, and critical thinking. You need to see both sides of the story, and you need to make a decision on what's going to fix it. Okay? Are we too tough on crime? I think at some point we could talk about it now, really. Mandatory minimum sentencing. Is that good or bad? I have some really cool opinion. I can fight that both ways. Um, so what do we do to make people trust the system again? All right, it's broken. It's broken from the beginning to the end. All right. What do you think? Where should we start? Who's responsible for making those changes? People don't understand. Here's a perfect example. I hear all the time when I go out and speak to the public, or I'm traveling someplace and I'm giving a seminar and I'm talking about somebody that was killed. Let's just say I talk about somebody that was shot by law enforcement. And invariably, I will get at least one individual who will actually say it, but they will have multiple people around the room that don't know them that will support them. And their question to me, well, why did the officer have to shoot him to kill him? Why couldn't he shoot him in the knee? Or why couldn't he shoot the gun out of his hand? Okay, if you guys know baseball, you know if you're batting 400, you're making bank and people want you. Now let's put that in perspective. If you guys are getting a 40 on a test, a quiz, or an assignment, are you passing? No. That's a pretty good F. Okay? So in baseball, you get rewarded for the F because of the type of thing that's going on. Hitting a little tiny ball with a bat that can come at you from a million different angles, you're pretty good if you can hit that ball. You're really good if you're hitting it 40% of the time. So, now we're not taking that same concept to law enforcement. And don't get me wrong, there are some that absolutely do some shooting when they shouldn't. All right, not defending them, but I want you to realize they are not trained to kill people. They're trained to shoot until the threat is under control. There's no longer a threat to other people or themselves. All right. So, what usually, and if the person's moving or running, you're shooting center mass. The biggest part of us that isn't going to move as much as this is your torso. Guess what? That's where all your vital organs are. Okay? So, yeah, the likelihood of somebody being shot with the intent to control or stop the behavior for the safety of everyone or anyone involved was just to stop, get it under control. Imagine somebody running and you trying to hit them in the leg so that they can't continue to run, or running at you, running away from you towards another individual they could, hurt, shooting the gun out of their hand. Are you I No, it's not going to happen. Okay, that's why we have a system here at IRSC where we train our law enforcement. It's called the VERTRA, and a lot of you have probably had a class with Mr. Dewey. I take the Honor Society in there. It's I call it's the world's biggest Xbox. Okay, and there's only two, I think, in the state of Florida, but it surrounds you 280 degrees, I think, and gives you scenarios where you have to make decisions: shoot or don't shoot, and then if you do shoot, where you shoot them at. All right, you guys screw that up all the time. Okay, I took my sister in there, and I had one of the trainers actually put her through a scenario. She killed so many civilians because your decision making is this quick. She didn't mean to, and she bragged about how good of it. We grew up on a farm, so we grew up around weapons. She brags about how good of a shot she was. Well, that's great. She killed the wrong people, and she shot so many times. One, the bad guys were still there, and two, she was out of ammo. Okay? So it's not as easy and clear cut as you think. So that question is asking you, how do you rebuild that trust? Whose job is it to explain to people what law enforcement is actually supposed to be doing? They're not out there, they're out there enforcing the laws that they didn't write. Okay, that's their job. They're enforcing the law that either we asked for or some politician got passed, and like it or not, it is what it is. Let's just take marijuana here in Florida. Okay, medically we can now have it, but if you're smoking it and you don't have a card, you're getting in trouble. All right, law enforcement doesn't want to arrest you or take that or this or that. They don't want to really be involved. You're back on the street before they're done with the paperwork. And many of them may not agree with the law, but it's the job. So how do we get that knowledge out into public so that they understand, which I think is part of the problem with this race, gender, crime issue, the age, people being picked on, and then you also have the officers that are not, I'm going to leave it because I don't want to put my fixes in your head, that are not doing the job properly, accidentally or intentionally. Okay? I can tell you here at IRSC, up until recently, Mr. Pierre Pacheco was responsible for the process of getting people through the selection center to become law enforcement. Not, and we're tough. Okay, I know we're going through changes, so I don't know what that looks like yet, so I can't speak to it, but we screen very, very difficult here at this school. And when some people don't like it or they get a no here, they go to another training center that's a little more liberal, or they don't do background checks as much as we do. Okay? So we do polygraphs, we do drug tests, we do physical ability tests, we do a written test. Uh, did I say physical? We actually make you have to go to the doctor. But not all of those other facilities put them through polygraphs or psychological evaluations. All right? Agencies, when they hire you, will do that. But at that point, you're already a sworn officer, so you have the ability to potentially get hired someplace. We try and weed out those apples before they can get into the system. Most of the time, I would say we get it right, but every once in a while, our hands are tied, and maybe somebody might get through that we don't want to get through. Okay? So, when you look at that assignment, is community policing going to fix it? It's very much an opinion based. But if you can find, I want you to try and find research to back up your opinion. Almost all these questions are going to be your opinion. This is where you think, I said I wasn't going to give you my opinion. I would automatically start right here with you, okay? Educating you on what the system is responsible for and who does what, all right? Then I would move on to those who've made it into the academy and they have not come through the academic side, or they've done this side, now they're there. More extensive training, okay? More diversity training, more counseling, whatever it happens to be. So for me, it starts with education of the public, of the student, of the potential law enforcement. Okay, that goes for fire as well. And then I have my own opinions going on. You may want to start someplace else because you may want to stamp it out much quicker and then come back and start training. Okay, so just do some research to back up your opinion, and we're good. If you can't find research, say, I found research that says XYZ. However, I feel that this would be a better option for where I live or where I grew up. Okay? No right or wrong answer. It can only be wrong if you don't defend it properly or cite it. Okay? So sorry for another long one, but this is a week I'm pretty passionate about, and I'm right there with a lot of you. I defend a lot of officers for things that we hear on the media that didn't go well, and I throw just as many under the bus for making bad decisions, and then just as many for making intentional decisions that I think, can't prove, that were intentional and not just a mistake or a snap judgment in the moment. All right, guys, I want you to have a great 4th of July weekend. If you have any questions, comments, throw them at me. And I've been posting some news articles that I just think are interesting, that are current and relevant. So if you want to throw something out there, throw something out there. You want to make a comment, start a feed. Okay? Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Don't be stupid. And I'll see all of you guys back here next week.